Dear Father, it has been since 2 weeks ago since I had my last confession. What did you want to confess about? My boyfriend. Well, I've been engaging in homosexual relations, watching things that are not even approved by the church. Oh, shit! Gotcha, didn't I? This is Skinny E Media alongside Bobatron, and here we're going to be talking about something that the Catholic Church doesn't want you to see or hear,
or any religion,
or Viktor Orban, or anyone that's in control of so many governments. We're going to be talking about LGBTQ plus cinema. Sorry, I got you a little bit off a tangent there.
Well, I would say it was on a tangent. It was pretty relevant to the topic at hand.
Oh no, definitely. It's, in all fairness, it's going to be one of our most controversial podcasts that we've done. We have done very many. One about vigilantes, and I've done one about blasphemy and sex and racism. This one's going to be a little bit more by the throat because of several things. One, Pat Robertson has passed away just recently. He's a very controversial spokesperson and pastor who hosted the 700 Club. Everyone in America loves him, or at least it seems. Bills have been passed through certain state governments, particularly Florida, which have restricted LGBTQ presence and rights with Don't Say Gay and banning drag competitions and presentations to the public. And then Uganda had a law that said, well, if you're going to be engaged in homosexual relations, you'll face the death. This is a very frightening time to live in. Even if you're not LGBT, if you're a woman, black, or poor, suicide may be the only option. But we're here to dispel that. We want to give people a voice in these challenging times, and even this Pride Month. But first, let's just start out, because I just wanted to say important matters, because I know for everyone, things are difficult, plus inflation. What was your experience with LGBTQ cinema?
Oh, wait, are you asking me?
Yep.
To be honest, I don't have quite an lurid, quite a extensive history with LGBTQ. I mean, I suppose being heterosexual, but I am probably not something I really felt when I needed to see. I mean, I only saw Brokeback Mountain 3 years ago, which was that was kind of like the flagship of LGBTQ cinema, as it was the first one to just unapologetically show two men, making out and shagging and everything. I mean, I've also watched that Blue is the Warmest Color, that from France, which is it centers around a lesbian couple, and oh boy, that doesn't pull any punches. I mean, yeah, 18 over here, NC-17 in America, whereas Brokeback Mountain was just R/15 of it. Doesn't Blue is the Warmest Color does go into sort of porn levels, whereas like Brokeback doesn't. So we've got that. Just trying to think what else I might have seen that might have been related to LGBTQ cinema. I mean, there was that TV show Queer as Folk that was came about in 1999, but I never really watched it. But that was in the late 90s when people were a lot more homophobic than they were now, and I'm sad to say I was actually no exception. So of course, naturally, I saw a TV show about two guys kissing. My 14-year-old self just went, "Ugh, I don't want to see that." But in retrospect, I'm aware and immature of me. I suppose there's a lot of films now that might be added in because they contain a gay character or an LGBTQ character of some sort, as it is becoming more commonplace now. And I don't know if it's causing society become more tolerant, or society has become more tolerant. That's why they've increased these characters representation. Either way, I consider it a win. I suppose that's about it. I don't really have a huge amount to say to start off with, to be honest.
Well, that's fine there because we can talk sort of freely about these things. On these podcasts, we don't really have sort of censorship barriers, really. I mean, Rob has openly talked about um, seeing Bazemore, or at least owning a copy of it. I think you mentioned about previous drug use before. I've mentioned about watching certain anime titles and having suicidal thoughts. Now, on my end personally, I am not of the LGBT persuasion, but there have been a few instances, and I'm sorry to say this for anyone who's listening, including some members of my family. I had a few sort of homoerotic relations, at least when I was at school. I was at an all-boys school, and this was at a time where, because I've talked about this in the past before, where it was quite difficult for me. I always kept getting bullied, bullying because I was partly American, because I was partly ethnic or of a different race. And that was at the same time that I turned to anime and electronic music. So I found those two avenues as an escape. But yes, there were some men, we were of similar age in my lifetime, that sort of looked very feminine. Uh, that was before we started growing a lot of facial hair, and I always wanted to get to know him a little bit more, but that wasn't going to happen at the time, and I had to be a little bit in the quiet about it. But let's just say I saw him naked. We both saw ourselves naked at one time, and I'm a little bit happy, but that was just a momentary thing. Most of my experience has been with women, even though it is quite difficult for me. But at the same time, my experience with this subgenre of cinema, weirdly enough, started out with Bruno, which many people found it was
I forgot
homophobic
about that.
over inundating stereotypes of this sort. It got an 18 certificate. I saw that, weirdly enough, but I saw the 15 certificate version just to be on the safe side because I wasn't quite 18 at the time yet.
15 certificate version. I didn't know there was one of them.
Yeah, it came out like about 2 weeks after the 18 certificate Bruno, and they cut about it by about 3 or so minutes. It was called Bruno Snipped. This was another way to try to cash in on the teen audience because they saw Borat, but they couldn't go see Bruno legally. So, yeah, that was actually really not my first experience with this subgenre, but many people find that film a bit controversial, anyways. Some people say it's not as very good as Borat, but I thought, hey, it's not as bad as everyone says it is. It's just very in your face about it. Many people, including many straight people, will not like it. But there, that's my first experience. And then you were saying about Brokeback Mountain and Blue is the Warmest Color. I remember seeing Brokeback Mountain, and all the headlines came about it. Oh, that was quite difficult. I'll say the school bullying one could hear from floors away, saying, "Oh, I don't like this. It's a bit puffy or faggy or whatever kind of slur you want to use." I remember all. I didn't want to see it myself, just like you. I think homophobia is inundated when you're belonging to a certain generation. Gen Z and probably Gen Alpha has it much luckier
Yeah, well,
than us millennials.
as young as well, don't get me started with Gen Xers and Boomers before that. I think it's a bit early to talk about Gen Alpha, seeing as the oldest ones are only just turning 10, I think. Yeah, I think the Zoomers stop at 2012, so Alpha starts at 2013. But yeah, you are right. I mean, also, yeah, I forgot about Bruno. I will say something about Brokeback Mountain. Even when it did come out, it was basically the uh butt of many homophobic jokes. I remember, like I said, I watched it only 3 years ago, back in 2020 during the lockdown, because I found it on Prime, and of course, as I always do, I post it on Facebook that I was watching, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people did just make loads of homophobic jokes around about it. And I was just thinking, dude, it's been like 15 years, and people are still making these jokes. I already thought we had moved on, because bearing in mind that between those two dates, I mean, back in like 2005, how many countries had gay marriage? Just Spain, Netherlands, and
Canada was one of the early adopters. I
oh
know
yeah, Canada was one. Yeah.
Netherlands was quite ahead of us, but it took America about another 10 years, 2015 on a national scale. But that was because of a court case. Had that court case never happened, it probably still would be illegal, like in Mississippi or
Well, yeah,
Arkansas. And England, I think, was legal in 2013.
2013. The UK was. I don't know if it was all of the UK, but England and Wales, yeah, 2013. I think Scotland and Northern Ireland took a bit longer because they have their own different judicial systems. They yeah, Scotland Ireland 2013, France or no, I mean, well, let's fucking rewind. England and Wales 2013. I think Scotland and Northern Ireland a bit later, but I can't remember how much later. As a Republican one, but that's a totally different matter. France also legalized it in 2013. Germany took until 2017, which is makes you think, damn, Germany, you took longer than America. I mean, that ain't a good look. But yeah, I mean, that just goes to show. I mean, how much time's come on. I mean, back in the 2000s, gay marriage was still a controversial issue. I say controversial. Basically, the right wing chuds were all against it and everything, whereas those on the left were vocalizing support for it. But then again, you always get those like quote unquote on the fence centrists who just can't decide which side they want to be on, side they want to take, and will always say, "Well, I just don't know," and everything. And of course, here we go. Well, now it's 18 years after Brokeback Mountain and everything, and of course, the vast majority, only the chuddiest of the chuds, the absolute dregs of the kind of Ron DeSantis crowd and everything, would probably even vocalize any opposition to gay marriage, and even then, they might actually not go that far and just and be too busy, more focused on trans people rather than gay people, and more focused on you shouldn't be grooming our kids rather than two adults getting married. Sorry, it's a bit of a may have gone off a tangent, may have been a bit of a rant there or a ramble there, but
No, I
yeah.
think it's absolutely perfect. Well, what I'm noticing lately is much more backlash at the transgender community, um, the T in LGBTQ, because it's a relatively new phenomenon and it's a little more open than certainly, one could be gay at one point, but now transgender is a lot more sort of aware and known about. And anytime you have sort of new phases or sort of new material at face value, people tend to backlash quite violently. We saw this with the rise of pornography when it came about in the 70s. So many people were against it, but it was so widespread. You had some, strong defenders, but some people who really did not like it and threatened obscenity charges on people like Harry Reams and the people who made Deep Throat, so on and so forth, which also in many ways led to probably its decline because after that initial shock and then also being oversaturated, things started to die down. And let's not forget Ronald Reagan and AIDS.
Oh
The
Christ, how the
historical,
fuck did I forget that?
you know, history of LGBT is quite an interesting one because it's sort of more or less started off with the works of Oscar Wilde, who was presumed to have a sort of queer-like tendencies, but then most of the discussions you tend to hear about it to be coming from how it was illegal pre-1967, at least in the UK, with the sodomy and buggery laws, and then they sort of lifted that and decriminalised it if you were over 21, then they'd lower it to 18, and then so on and so forth, depends on which region you're in. The Stonewall Uprising, the AIDS epidemic, which I know was a big thing, affected that community. And it wasn't just gay people, but there were many people who were sharing needles for like drugs or having sex with people. You could still get AIDS from that. Magic Johnson, people called him an F word, the other F word,
I
but
know,
he was just
we know
straight
what you
to
mean.
hell. It's Yeah, it's a really bizarre one. And if you look at the sort of history, censorship wise and film wise, of gay relations in cinema, Uh, it's actually quite an interesting one because even in the 80s, you had some Derek Yarman films that came about that were passed uncut, weirdly enough, despite the fact that in the 80s, homophobia was still very rife and rampant. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were still the gods of the government, and anything that the straight man can say can be used against you.
And she, yeah, but Margaret Thatcher, she passed that Section 28 bill, which I don't think. I mean, I'm getting mixed reviews and mixed information when it was repealed. Some say 2000, some say 2003, but it came through in 1987. Of course, I started school in September of '89. I finished school, like Mandarin education, in 2001 when I did my GCSEs. I went on to do other education, but basically, yeah, it's further education. It wasn't like school. So I just think during my whole time at school, although most of the later schools I went to were actually independent schools and therefore weren't government funded, but like just about during that whole time, when teachers weren't legally allowed to tell you that it's actually okay to be gay. Um, that's so fucked up, especially considering just like I mentioned earlier, how homophobic we were as kids. I mean, we thought calling someone gay was a joke in and of itself, which is so wrong and pathetic when you think about it now. I was also going to. You mentioned just a few minutes ago about it's like 1967 was when was when homosexuality was decriminalised. That's just England and Wales, as I mentioned earlier. Scotland took until 1981 and Northern Ireland in 1982, which isn't a great look at the end of the day because I don't know if you know this, but in France they decriminalised it all the way back in 1791.
That I was aware of, 'cause I've seen it about in a few headlines before, but I believe there was a source that told me, or maybe this is in my head, uh, that even though it was decriminalized back there, doesn't mean that the stigma was gone away because France was still awfully Catholic, much
That's
more than now.
well, yeah, probably more now. I mean, true, but I think the stigma may have been there, but at least they actually didn't uh, persecute, like actually politically persecute them. I mean, obviously, it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty obvious that it was related to the French Revolution, which was vastly secularized. And you say about France being Catholic, well, the revolution was actually virulently anti-Catholic. It was based on basically they want to destroy Christianity, which I think is pretty base, to be honest. Because I mean, I don't think we could talk about homophobia too much without bringing up the old that old chestnut of religion.
Well,
And
no, it's absolutely true. All religions, even though it may vary depending on which part of the world you're in, always condemn the activity. I think it's between a man and a woman.
well, it's mostly the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The ones out of that tended to not have too much of a problem with it. I mean, many non-Christian and non-Muslim cultures around the world prior to colonization actually either were perfectly okay with it, and a lot of pre-Christian cultures in Europe, like Rome and Greece, and well, definitely Greece, uh, didn't have much of a problem with homosexuality. I mean, we know what the ancient Greeks were like. Um,
Grumpy Pompey, and
yeah, I
those
mean, I don't know
sort
if I've
in certain films, TV shows.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I ever told him what, but well, everyone who knows me knows this, and anyone who follows me on Facebook knows this. I am an atheist, and I don't have a huge amount of respect for religion, and and of course, I walk in a lot of secularist and atheist circles, and one of the things we negative aspects of religion we do usually like to bring up as a means of generally attacking religion, but also as an example of how poisonous we find religion is its homophobia. I mean, we mentioned Pat Robertson earlier, but there's also the even later Jerry Falwell and that Fred Phelps of the Westboro Baptist Church, thankfully, who are all dead and and they could all rest in piss. I wouldn't mind finding their graves, so I could actually piss on them, but that's all in America, and I can't be asked to do it. I'll probably have a piss before I get to them anyway. Um, but yeah, I mean, they were just classic examples of the bigotry inherited, well, in this case, in Christianity. But of course, I mean, look at Saudi Arabia, which is basically considered to be the cultural hub of Islam, and it's completely under Salafist government, and it has been since its foundation. And if you're gay in Saudi Arabia, you get publicly beheaded.
I'm afraid so. I'm afraid so. I know you're funny enough, weirdly enough, bringing up something that a lot of people will not want to hear, but there are sections and factions within the LGBT movement that are, can also be Islamophobic, or misogynistic, or racist. There is intersectionality
Philo
within
Yiannopoulos.
the communities. Yep, Milo. There are sections of gay men who hate Muslims and Muslims hate gays, even though they vote left. At least in Western countries, they'll tick label Democrat. Doesn't necessarily mean they see alike. They have different reasons for why they would vote the way they do, and that can be also problematic. And then there's been a lot of also cases of uh, Black Americans being more homophobic than white Americans on the basis of the importance of the church in Black communities to escape from the poverty and racism of the Deep South. So yeah, it's really complex
Well,
to where
one of
one can
the
argue. Go on.
one of the criticisms of the gangster rap genre that was popularized by NWA and became quite prominent during the 90s was um, that it promoted, along with misogyny, homophobia, as they did throw F slurs and the way of homophobic slurs around uh, quite flippantly. I mean, obviously, I don't. Obviously, a lot of these people who say this aren't positioned to point fingers because they've probably got enough homophobia and misogyny in their own backyard and everything. And it was just another excuse to denigrate something that came out of the African American community. But in fact, have you seen Straight Outta Compton?
I sure have.
Do you
Obviously,
remember that
fulfilled
scene?
part censorship.
Do you remember what that scene? I think it's Easy E. I think it was that, or Eric, as referred to a doctor, is advised by the doctor that he has AIDS, and
He says,
of
but
course the
I'm not.
first thing he says is, "I can have AIDS. I ain't no F slur." And well, the doctor knows that it can happen through straight heterosexual intercourse as well. But I mean, the fact is that he automatically just thought of homophobic rhetoric when he was told he had AIDS.
No, but a lot of that was being propelled as propaganda and what the media and government was telling people that you could get AIDS and by being with people of the same sex. They said that even about monkeypox as well, which is sort of came about a little after COVID was quite big. So yeah, it's if a certain minority group is being the target of a particular sort of problem that's occurring, be it crime or disease. Obviously, they blame Chinese people for COVID, but it did come from Wuhan.
Never heard it pronounced COVID before. It's always pronounced with a soft O, COVID.
That's just
Just want
how
to throw that out there.
that's just me pronouncing it a different way than others. I pronounce Rick Mail as Rick Mile.
Yes, I
I
have heard of that.
call mayonnaise as mayonnaise.
Yeah,
That's
weird,
just
mate.
my accent. It's not nothing to do with America or England, just my accent.
Okie
Type.
dokie.
But yes, if a certain minority group is an easy target or scapegoat for any sort of particular growing problem, they will be the target. That, weirdly enough, Australia Compton was not flagged for that particular slur in the 15 categories, mainly because of the sex and language and drug use. Although there's an 18 version that has more explicit scenes of sex and
Yeah,
drug
but
use.
that version's also NC-17 rated.
Well, not officially, but would presumably be so.
But it's quote unquote unrated, and I think we can read between the lines and guess what that means.
Oh yes, of course. Well, yes, people really like that sort of thing. Yeah. Sex and drugs
Question.
themselves.
Question, Mark, have you seen The Imitation Game?
Yeah, weirdly enough, I saw that when I was in Tennessee. I was at a university there, and you know how that part of the country in America is very conservative and religious. I saw it with someone who was, weirdly enough, Ukrainian. I think he's fighting the war front at this moment. He, and I'm sorry to say this, he wasn't quite too comfortable with some of the themes and messaging involved, but he did like the story. So it's a bit of a strange dichotomy because it's a pretty standard 12.
Yeah, I know.
But it's the politics of it that may be a little disturbing from more conservative views.
Well,
Because
it's for his. Well, I mean, it's a historical aspect. And of course, Alan Turing was Get who the film's about, and who invented the Turing machine, which helped decode the Enigma machine and helped us win the war. Basically, was himself gay, and of course, at that time when that prior to 1967, so it's still illegal in the UK, and I think he was like chemically castrated. I think because because of this reason. That is so fucked up. I mean, this man's a national hero, and it just goes to shit. Oh, like God, we've come a long way. I mean, just not even a century ago, and we're acting in ways that can only be described as barbaric. It makes you think when you actually look at the boomer generation of this country to think they were actually alive and old enough to remember. I mean, obviously not World War II, right? But they were alive actually when homosexuality was actually illegal over here. And don't we start on their parent, the generations before them, some of whom are actually still alive.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've only got one grandparent. She's from born in 1939. So there are certain topics that I simply will not discuss because she's of a certain generation where you just didn't show something like that, or you don't talk about it so openly. It's like using certain four-letter words. You would say it to your grandmother.
No, but then again, they would happily say lots of racist and homophobic and completely outdated, bigoted language. So, hey, swings and roundabouts, really.
Absolutely, there. Well, yeah, there's even millennials ourselves who can relate to where corporal punishment was still abound in schools. I know I got a clip in the ear a few times, and this was before it became illegal, 97.
Uh, I never actually got beaten at school, which I'm kind of glad. But yeah, I know it's. I know it was 87 they banned caning. I just suddenly remembered. Speaking of old people, let's not forget what an absolute homophobic piece of shit Mary Whitehouse was.
Most people tend to forget about the gay news controversy that was abound.
Oh yeah.
She was targeting that magazine for some of their salacious articles.
Although it's mostly for blasphemy that she decided to do it, but either way, that's a stupid reason to do something because it's either homophobic or it's religious bigotry of some sort, and we can do without either of those things.
Unfortunately, you would have to kill everyone on the street and condition them like robots or with AI technology to approach a certain way. We live in a world where people have so many different opinions. Some of them come from the wrong sides of the track, be it because of their income or upbringing or education level. It's very difficult to police people's thought. I wish I could do the same, but I don't think that could ever happen, really. But yes,
But
Mary Whitehouse.
we can educate the public, and we can sort of shift the cultural what's it called, the Overton window towards uh, a more tolerant society and a more tolerant outlook. We can also, or even accepting rather than just tolerant, um, we can also make it so society is not a safe place for bigots to go around, and of course, where bigots don't feel so comfortable and flippantly just letting out their fucked up views. Which is why I think it's kind of responsible of those who do care about the rights of the LGBTQ society, as long as other minorities and other marginalized groups as well, to basically, if they hear someone spout a bigoted thing, to really go to town on them on it and make them regret opening their gob.
Well, fortunately, we're in a sort of double situation going on because a lot of governments worldwide and many states in the US have found ways to criminalize certain ideologies and thought, or at least brandish them as bad simply because it's caused it's what they tell you in the media, and also the courts skewed conservative, so they now have a reason to get away with certain things they probably otherwise may not have, or as explicitly. I think the problem is the loopholes in question can bring over people who take it too far. I mean, there was a point in time where, actually, fuck it, not a point in time. Now, sorry, I no longer have a Twitter. You want to know why? Elon Musk. Elon Musk thinks it's okay to just put a bunch of people who think just like him on his platform. Span all of his garbage and pseudoscience. Yes, I know people say, oh, he's an environmentalist, oh, he's a great entrepreneur. But would you trust a guy who accused one of the Thai rescue people of being a paedophile? A little bit
Well, I
unhinged.
wouldn't trust Elon Musk with as far as I could kick him anyway. Guy's a dick. I mean, he's always like one of those people that is like, what's the stupid person's idea of a smart person, and he is such a glaring example of that. And ever since he's taken over fucking Twitter, I mean, the Nazis have just come back with a vengeance. He says it's like is about respecting free speech, but it's like it's a private platform. It's not the government. Free speech isn't an issue here. It's only an issue if a government is demanding that you censor this stuff. Which, for the record, the Modi government of India has actually demanded he does censor stuff, and he's capitulated to that. So he's a complete fucking hypocrite, even on that.
Exactly. Erdogan requested he do the same thing too, and as we well now know, look what happened in Turkey. So he's really all over the place. I'm actually a little surprised he's not getting as much backlash for him being Asperger's, high functioning autistic, than he is his politics. But I'm sure there's going to come a point in time where
And that
he's
he
going to
made loads of
for his
money off,
Asperger's.
and that he made loads of money off an emerald mine in apartheid South Africa.
Yeah, you almost never hear anyone talk about that, really, including
No,
some
I
on
hear
that.
I hear quite a few people talk about it. The mainstream media just likes to gloss over it. So yeah, I also, in terms of uh, homophobia and LGBTQ, because I did mention this actually on our first podcast with Tom, just about comparing MPA with BBFC. The 2017 Power Rangers movie has one of the characters being LGBTQ, and for that very reason, it got an 18 rating in Russia. I mean, how fucking ridiculous is that? She doesn't even commit any on-screen acts of any on-screen sexual acts. She just says she's gay, and because of that, the Russia had to be rated 18 in Russia. I mean, just can't fucking even.
Well, a lot of it has to do with Russia taking anti-Western views on almost everything you can imagine. And if it keeps the KGB and Putin's ideology in power, anything sort of goes, really. And that's what happens when you have someone who wields too much power into one person's hands, or you condition them to think a certain way, and this is what you get. It is awfully bizarre, at least in our sort of Western, white, developed eyes, that we could be so upset that they would ban or heavily censor from that has queer content. But it's an unfortunate reality in almost any country. China will not accept films that have openly homosexual themes. Singapore is a little bit more flexible, but they usually tend to relegate a lot of the LGBT films and stuff to the M18 and R21 categories in that country. And almost all Islamic countries ban homosexual content or kissing in a lot of their films. I think in India, it usually has to be regulated to the A category. And in Pakistan, it's not permitted, to where there was a film that was very controversial that was called, I think, is it Joyride or Joyland? Yes, that was banned because of the transgender themes and material, which I was actually quite taken aback by, because um, I didn't know transgender was a thing in Pakistan. They're certainly
I
not quite ready for it because the culture is very Islamic.
Well, I mean, transgender people exist, and they exist just everywhere. I mean, of course, but they do because what that doesn't they would, yeah. But I mean, considering homosexuality is, to the best of my knowledge, illegal in Pakistan because they're just fucked up like that. It's just like that. It's not surprising that they would actually. Unfortunately, I mean, it sucks, but it's unfortunately not surprising that they wouldn't come be too welcoming of trans people. Because again, we were talking about like films being banned or censored in these countries uh, for for
LGBT.
having LGBT. Yes, of course, you see a lot of modern films, especially ones made by Disney or Pixar, and of course they will put in in order to like score points with the LGBT community, they'll put in some representation, but it's always like some remarkably fleeting. They did this actually in Avengers Endgame as well. Actually, they'll put in some remarkably fleeting reference to a gay couple or anything, like show a gay kiss or something, or show two people of the same couple of the same gender even holding hands or something, or even someone's just making a fleeting reference to being that saying they're married to someone of the same sex from. Of course, it's so quick because when they send it to places like Russia and China and all those other countries, they can just cut it out. I mean, yeah, I mean, on the face, you think sometimes you think, oh, well, it's nice of them to be representative and everything. It's like, yeah, but you're caring about the bottom line at the end of the day. You don't actually care about these issues. You tend to spout about, much as like in the case with that Bud Light, was it Dylan Mulvaney controversy?
Oh yeah, I've seen all the headlines about it. Yeah, I think it was blown out of proportion, really. But I think
Really, you think so?
that, in my opinion, a company doesn't need to try too hard to appease to a demographic only to get backlash from it, or on the same time, I call it tokenism because people tend to get very angry about that. It on one side, the left will say, "Well, you're just treating us as pawns for your corporate gain." The right will say it's promoting wokeism or you're promoting an agenda. So no one likes it. That's why so many people hate that Gillette advert. I personally wasn't affected by it, but some people, when you start bringing it up, they want to just bang tables or stab someone just because you mentioned that fucking Gillette commercial that said we need to be more respectful of women. Why are people so fucking angry about these things? I don't get it.
because
Sorry.
they're just cunts, all right? Because they can accuse us of being snowflakes, but really that's just like psychological projection. I can talk, I swear. Swear. I mean, many obviously it being Pride Month, loads of companies are going to start donning the rainbow flag, and as a sign of solidarity. Well, as I suppose a sign of solidarity, but it is just a part of their marketing campaign. I remember one person I follow on Facebook and Twitter and mostly YouTube and everything. He's called the One Janitor, if you've heard of him. I don't know. Um, was making a comment about that whole phrase "go woke, go broke," to which he said, why do you think they're going woke to begin with? You don't honestly think they actually care about these issues they're talking about, do you?
No, but you're onto something there because, at least in our eyes, because we're left wing, both of us, there is an element there. It's almost trying to be tokenist or trying to appease so much, but at the end of the day, they want your dollar, they want your pounds. They don't necessarily care about you. It's just good PR to appease that way. It's why you saw all these companies do the whole 8 minutes and 47 seconds silence when George Floyd was killed by the police, because it makes them seem like we're being respectful. We do care about these issues. But where were you in the past where that same thing was happening? A lot of it's sort of media constructed. You've got to be quite careful about these things, really. It's like the whole climate change issue. They say, we're going to save CO2 emissions.
Greenwashing.
I'm sorry, yeah, you said just that. So, yes, approach cautiously, no matter what. Even though the right likes to go on about wokeism, on the left, it can flip on its head and be a bit of a problem too, depending on the circumstance. Bohemian Rhapsody comes to mind.
I was actually going to bring that up. I forgot. I got a little off on a tangent because there's a few other. Yeah, the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. And I wanted to bring up Rocket Man as well because they're both two musicals about a gay British musical icon, Freddie Mercury and Elton John. Elton John, of course, still being with us, whereas, of course, Freddie Mercury, unfortunately, is not.
Nope, you're absolutely right. Now, Bohemian Rhapsody is much more controversial, from what I heard, because the director was accused of rape and sexual harassment, where he was taken off on set, and they got Dexter Fletcher, who did Rocket Man, to sort of step in as the shadow director when Bryan Singer got all those allegations against him. And then there's also the controversy about, did Rami Malek deserve the Oscar, or was it being straight-washed? Despite there being scenes of Rami Malek's Freddie Mercury character kissing a man as well as a woman. I haven't seen it, but you can shed some light if you like.
You haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody?
No, I think it looks overrated.
It's a good film. A Rocket Man is probably a better film because due to its R/15 rating, as opposed to Bohemian Rhapsody's PG-13/12A rating, it can really go more into the nitty gritty of like what his backstage antics and what he got up to and everything, and his generally rock and roll lifestyle. I don't know what I can really add or anything. It's been a while since I saw it. I've only seen it once, but I mean, yeah, because of its because of its lower rating, it does dance around the issue of his homosexuality and his gay relations and everything. He does mention later on towards the end that he does have AIDS, and he actually flat out says that he has AIDS, not just pussyfooting around it and let you to figure out for yourself. But of course, whilst experiencing that he does have like a gay lover, it's very subtly implied. Whereas in Rocket Man, they do just show him just getting on with another bloke. So I mean, cowardly of Bohemian Rhapsody, but I suppose they wanted that dollar, so they're going to puss out a bit. I actually found it. There's something I actually thinking of both Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man because they both have the same premise. As I said, a gay British music icon, which made me think, man, they should do a film about Judas Priest.
Well, I think that probably won't play as well because they're a very controversial cult metal band that was accused of making demonic music that led to a child suicide.
That was thrown out of court.
So I had to do the reverse. We spin the record backwards, 35 RPM.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was thrown out of court. That was fucking stupid. We discussed that actually on the music podcast, didn't we? Just how fucking ridiculous that was and everything. I mean, I can't say anything about that trial that Bill Hicks didn't already mention about, so that won't get off topic. But no, I mean, because Rob Halford, like Freddie Mercury and Elton John, is gay, and again, it wasn't exactly a secret to his bandmates or to original British fan base who saw him come on stage dressed head to toe in studded leather. But apparently, to the American fan base, they were like, "What?" It's like, come on, man. You should have probably figured that out.
No, but some famous queer talent can appear as being quite macho, masculine, or straight, but gender conformity or ideas can be quite fluid. There's even some filmmakers, as we speak, who appear on the surface quite macho and hetero, cis, whatever words they use that the Gen Z generation uses, but they're actually LGBT, like Clive Barker and Don Mancini.
Yeah, the director Bryan Singer, who did the first two X-Men movie, and unfortunately did Superman Returns as well, is also gay as well. Well, one person that was actually gay, and of course took everyone by surprise. Obviously, he's been dead for a while now because of AIDS. Was Rock Hudson. Have you heard of that name before?
Absolutely. My mother likes the old films, so he's a name that pops up every now and again. A lot of people were taken aback by his death, and then the rumors spreading about him being straight gay, to where they had to get famous actresses that were quite beautiful at the time, at least to Hollywood standards, to try to act as his beard. Beard is a sort of term I've heard about in certain circles as for gay men who try to appear straight so they won't get targeted. So yeah, a lot of that was happening. I think
Apparently, Hollywood was there was a
with
sort of like
big
there
names.
was a there was a code of silence around Hollywood at the time being, and of course, usually when you hear of a Hollywood code of silence, you sort of think, "Oh shit, what are they trying to hide now?" Because you think it's like some history of sexual abuse or something. But of course, no. Back then, it was just trying to hide the fact that some of their stars were actually gay back when that was actually not just frowned upon, but actually illegal. So I suppose I got to give some props to them there.
Well, now in a modern day context, they would twist that around and say it was a demonic cult of pizza giving pedophiles who like to lure on children, or because there's anti Semitic elements involved, Goyim, to pray and feed the babies of Goyim children to feed into their matzah soup or something. Some really bizarre ideas about the Hollywood cabal, whether it be anti Semitic or based on pedophilia or something.
It's generally an anti-Semitic trope and everything.
That includes QAnon as well.
I think we were. I think it basically is QAnon, to be honest. I mean, that's just a continuation of that old New World Order conspiracy theory, which is basically just a continuation of what was written in Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
We could go on about that for hours on end, but I don't think that would make sense on an LGBT podcast. But you are
Right.
right about Rock Hudson, because I heard about that. I was kind of surprised myself because it may appear to some that unless you're a certain way, you can't be that. But in all fairness, I've actually met many lesbians on the flip side who were very feminine. Sometimes even tried dating with them or tried flirting with them, but when they said that they're not into men, I felt a bit glum, but I kind of understood why, and I didn't hold them against it. But I know we haven't talked much about lesbianism on this podcast, but that is one of the few areas of homosexuality that seems to be kind of normalized. It's mainly through pornography that seems to be less of a taboo than anything. Men get really off on watching two women doing it, but if it's
Yeah.
two men doing it, oh.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Never understood why that was. Because apparently, when I looked at the old what I call them buggery laws of England and Wales that basically forbid homosexuality, apparently it was only for men. Apparently, female homosexuality was always allowed. Uh, yeah, so double standard maybe, but still kind of weird. Although it's probably reverse of what was going on in ancient Greece. So they probably uh, frowned upon female homosexuality, but were perfectly okay with male homosexuality because, well, it's two men, isn't it? You know, if a man shags with a man, that means that's a good thing because he's not he's not lowering himself to having relations with a woman who could get cooties from. Basically, the ancient Greeks were very misogynist, is what I mean.
Oh, of course. I mean, there's even still misogyny and racism even within the gay community. I know you
Again,
said
Milo
about,
Yiannopoulos
but I've heard because I actually
and
knew
Dave
people
Rubin.
in my previous work. One of them was talking about, oh, I don't like people from the ghetto or something like that, but he was identified as LGBT himself. And then there was some sort of allegations about. I'm sure this will probably affect Philip Schofield because the media has been targeting him lately because of an affair he's been having with a younger man. Some people have said that's homophobic. But let's not forget as well the horrors of Jeffrey Dahmer, who I'm sure that made people very homophobic, especially after they saw that Netflix series that came out that was 18 certificate. Also, not only was he LGBT, at least in denial, very sort of macho gay, he also had a fetish, a racial fetish as well, which that's a little hard to explain, really. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer was a cunt, and he can rest in piss and everything like that. I think that goes without saying. I mean, there is the whole racist element of that because he was killing people of color. He got away for it so long. I mean, we saw that scene where that kid basically escaped from his his half flat, completely drugged up, and the frickin' those black ladies were talking to the police, trying to tell him, "Look, this kid's been drugged. You need to come in." And Dharma just goes, "No, no, no. He's just my boyfriend. He's just a little drunk and everything." And of course, the police side with him. And of course, he goes in and goes on to kill the kid. And of course, if they had done a cursory glance, they would have found so many red flags of which to take Dharma in, like the fact that he'd already been arrested for frickin' uh, child sexual abuse of that kid's brother, no less. I mean, it's just yeah, it's just a fucking joke. And God, the American police force are a bunch of dicks.
I've been pulled over twice in my life when I was there. Thankfully, nothing fatal happened, but yeah, I always felt something bad was going to happen. But thankfully, it didn't. But that cannot be said for very many people. But yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because when you start adding in the serial killer element and the racial stuff, and then the fact that he's also gay, or at least he's in denial about it, it really complicates people's opinions about a certain particular person. Because I know uh, Kevin Spacey's getting some of that as well because people were accusing him of pedophilia and homosexuality at the same time because he was trying to groom these 40 or 15-year-old boys or something like that. But I know some people would like to conflate the two elements together, which, for one, I don't know. I'm not LGBT, so I can't speak for that. But pedophilia and child sexual abuse is a criminal offence.
It certainly is.
Anyone can do
Right,
it.
so
Anyone can do it, straight or gay. Women don't do it as much, but there have been cases of that happening where a teacher will marry one of her students, and she went to prison for that. Like there were a few
yeah,
cases. Yeah,
because the kid was underage. So of course, yeah, that is however you phrase it, it is rape because the kid wasn't old enough to consent.
exactly. Homosexuality cannot be confused with being uh, code word for grooming of young boys. Like, I'm gonna come out of the bushes and take your child so you can go to West Hollywood and wear leather clothes. No, that's kind of twisting the narrative a little bit. So for anyone who's listening, please do not get the two confused. It only encourages vigilantism, which is another podcast that we've done in the past before that probably deals on certain elements. But I will say on your end, uh, the, it may not necessarily be homosexuality, but like homoeroticism, which we've seen in things like Fight Club or Frankie Goes to Hollywood's music video. Relax, don't do it. I don't know how you feel about that because I know there's many men who feel very uncomfortable watching two people kiss, even if it's not intentionally meant to be gay. But many people saw the scene from Godfather with the kiss of death as a warning to the mafia, or in Fight Club, you get a lot of two men who are oily and shirtless fighting. I've heard certain interpretations.
Well, but you know what they say about like people who are most repulsed by homosexuality? They're always the ones who have got the most to hide because they always seem to have a extreme obsession with like classic masculinity and everything to the point of homoeroticism. They're always the ones who seem to really like films like Fight Club and 300 and all these other films, which can. I'm also watching old school Arnie films or Stallone films or these 80s action films, which are like just so brazenly homoerotic. And of
And
course,
it's,
I also most mentioning a classic example is this guy Ted Haggard. I don't know if you know about him.
oh, he's one of those evangelical preachers.
Yeah, he was one of those hardcore like Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell types who used to talk about how gays are like sodomites. They're going to bring about the apocalypse, yada yada yada. And what happens to him? He's caught soliciting sex from a gay prostitute in a bathroom, in a public bathroom. It's
I
part
think
of the
my
course
side,
almost.
it sort of gives away how I feel about that. Talk the talk, but you can't walk the walk. It happens all the time.
Well, it's almost just a massive a running joke now. Just like anyone who's that massively obsessed with homophobic is like a secret in a closet. I mean, they made a joke about Fred Phelps. It's like he hates the thought of two men doing it, that he thinks about it every single day, every single waking moment of his life.
Hmm. Maybe Ron DeSantis at any given minute will be taken out of the closet, and he may have some baggage he may want to reveal. I mean,
Yeah,
he
he never
could be
got.
LGBT. He doesn't have a beard. He's got the blue eyes. That seems to be a bit of a turn on for some of the men there. But who knows?
Hmm, don't know about. Yeah, he might be. I mean, so
I
far
know.
we never managed to catch Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell or Fred Phelps in that sort of position. So if they were in the closet, they kept in the closet for the rest of their lives. But I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, we're just fucking hell. They're what assholes.
Well, if I'm legally allowed to say, and hopefully I won't get cut off, have you ever had a homoerotic experience in your life? Because I know I've mentioned it earlier on because of the circumstances. Had I been in a co-ed school, it probably would have never happened.
I can't say I've ever had a particularly one like that. I mean, obviously I've been into bodybuilding since I was about well, maybe 16. I've been lifting weights since I was 16, but I probably got massively into bodybuilding when I was about 17. And of course, a lot of bodybuilding doesn't fascination bodybuilding does involve looking at professional bodybuilders, and yeah, you don't get much more homoerotic than bodybuilding at the end of the day.
I guess so. I mean, you see shirtless lads holding up bars, but I mostly just see us trying to impress the woman, really. But I guess it can be interpreted in two different ways there. It's a very weird sort of minefield. I don't know anyone who's LGBT except the few people I did at a previous job I worked at, so I wouldn't be able to tell you on something like that. But I know from my experience, he did say he did like mostly regular films that regular people see. He didn't really watch like Brokeback Mountain or Rocket Man, but he liked a lot of Marvel and action movies. And I know some of the Marvel movies do have some of those elements. Like Captain America, and I think Eternals was a little bit more open about it because that
To
had the
be
LGBT element as well.
and to be quite an extensive one, meaning they weren't able to cut it out for the Russian and Chinese markets.
Exactly, which led to the film's ban. I heard more people complaining about. Oh, they said it was woke, but maybe not so much as Black Panther, but it was still woke. But I heard the sex scene got a bit of problems too, because that was a little bit unusual to pick in a superhero movie, even if brief. I don't know. Uh,
Also, you mentioned lesbians. One TV show I watched actually a long time ago, but I've only seen it once, was Tipping the Velvet, which is about a woman, well, a lesbian woman living in Victorian London who ends up having an affair with yeah, another woman and everything. I mean, it's about 3 episodes to it, and it's okay. But yeah, don't know if you've seen it or if anyone listening has seen it or what they thought. I mean,
I'm not too familiar with Tipping the Velvet, but as far as lesbianism in film is concerned, Black Swan comes to mind because that was a movie that was seen by many straight people, me included. But I did think that scene, which involved two women sort of getting at it, there was also the kind of Lingus element. It was quite uh, unsettling of a scene. I thought, oh, that's a bit strong for a 15. You can't show homosexuality, but at the same time, you can't show cunnilingus in a 15. So that took me a little by surprise.
Blue Valentine had it, didn't it?
It did, but it was between a man and a woman. So, yes, it was strong. And it got an NC-17 initially, but they downgraded it to an R on an appeal, which made me happy.
Yeah, but it's automatically was a 15 over here. But the point is, to me, I haven't seen Black Swan, but to me, the fact that it was able to get a complete uncut 15, all that stuff you mentioned is just a good example of consistency on the BBFC's part.
No, that is true. They didn't discriminate based on gender. Oh, sorry, not gender, but sexual orientation, which is a legal requirement. They're not allowed to do that. But had it come out in the 90s or the 80s, that scene would have gone 18, or perhaps cut, because they would have deemed it some sort of pornographic or lewd filth. I'm not so sure if James Furman was a homophobe, but he probably was. I know his views on women aren't very progressive-minded.
Yeah, well, I mean, he wasn't made progressive on a lot of things. He was just a bit of a dick at the end of the day. Yeah,
It's a bit of a weird one, I will say. Well, if anyone asks about my favorite LGBT film, it's either between Bruno or Flea, which I know I've talked about Flea on several occasions. It's a Danish animation / documentary. It's not for kids, but it got a 15 certificate for infrequent sexual threat and images of real dead bodies. But having seen the film, it's not that explicit. I've seen 12 films that get away with much more than Flea did. I think they overreacted. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I haven't seen it.
Wonderful movie about an Afghan refugee who pretty much for a lot of his life had to stay in the closet until he got asylum status to be in Denmark. Before Denmark became right-wing and anti-immigrant like it is now, went to a gay club and they played Daft Punk, or so it seems, on the speaker. And I thought that was quite a funny little scene there. It's certainly a great movie to talk about if you're ever going to show in secondary schools or universities. So there's that. I know much more schools are being restrictive about talking about LGBT sort of stuff, at least in the sex education department or health department. Because when I was growing up, the most we got for the sex education stuff was hetero. Never the queer element involved. That was pretty much absent. And my school wasn't religious. It was I got scholarship or bursary to it, but it wasn't independent. It was a bit like a Montessori type of school. That was the old boys' school I keep talking about.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I went to a couple of schools at the time, and pretty much all the schools I went to, the teachers, always the head teachers, are all bloody hardcore Christians, which is something I could have done without.
Well,
it was something.
Lord's Prayer.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I know most schools had to do that. Unfortunately, that's kind of sucked. Of course, one film that's suddenly come to my mind. I mean, it's not massively LGBTQ and everything, but it does feature it. Have you seen V for Vendetta?
Yeah, one of DC's best films. I know it had the brief subplot involving the lesbians who were targeted by the government and had to be separated because of what they were. I think that was quite a provocative moment.
That was holy shit. Yeah, there was that element, and of course there was there was Stephen Fry's character, who is revealed to be gay in her thing. Of course, that's probably true to Stephen Fry's actual true self, because he himself is gay, and that is yeah, so he can probably relate to that character quite a lot. But of course, I mean, yeah, it's not surprising when a fascist fascist government like that comes to power. Obviously, it's not portrayed as quite as fascistic as it is in the novel, the graphic novel, where they do just openly show these racist and homophobic tendencies. Well, unfortunately, those ultra right wing governments always tend to come down hard on the LGBTQ community. That's why I always say, whenever there's a Pride Month, they always say, like, well, why isn't there a straight Pride Month? Name one country in the world where it's illegal to be straight.
There aren't any. It's
exactly.
the social order.
Exactly.
That's part of the problem. I'm sure there'll be people who complain about this podcast saying, why are two straight men talking about this sort of subject? Well, we're left wing and we portray ourselves as allies, and it deals with censorship. So interpret it as you will. We are not J.K. Rowling. We will not go sort of tangent and kill off all of our audience because of it. You've heard about J.K. Rowling's
Transphobic views, yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
oh Christ, she had like, and she didn't. I mean, it's not like she just flippantly just made a mark and then apologized and said, "You know what? I'll try to be better." She has really dug her heels in and will consistently espouse these turf views. Turf being trans, exclusionary, radical feminist, and it's like no matter how much she gets criticized, and then criticized for it, she just continues to just spout this shit, and then she cries foul at being a victim because no one wants to associate with her because she's a piece of shit. And of course, yeah, then she has to bitch about cancel culture. But it's like, dude, you openly espoused a bigoted view in front of a whole world. You stood by it. You dug your heels in. You wouldn't say enough. You wouldn't apologize for it. It's like, what do you expect at the end of the day? I mean, you kind of dug your own grave there.
It's even more shocking because she's very well known for those books. I used to live in an area where they filmed the Harry Potter movies, maybe in Watford or Leavesden Green. So it was a little bit personal for me to see a lot of this all going on because I thought, oh, that's almost a career over, or at least it will be in the developed Western world, where transphobia is a little bit more stigmatized than it is, let's say, anywhere else. Take it as you will, but yeah, that's probably went a little bit out of place there. And then also the sort of irony between LGBT and Tories, because you also have some who have conservative views and feel like they're more accepted there than they are in the Labour Party, mainly for tax or financial purposes. Peter Thiel is a Republican donor, even though he used to be a libertarian. Take that as you will. He's gay, but he supports Republicans based on financial policy or
Well, bro,
his
I
fear
have
for
heard.
political correctness.
I have heard of the log cabin Republicans, who are basically gay people who support the Republican Party and everything, which just makes you basically makes you think. It's like, what the fuck? And there's that whole meme of like the leopards eating my face party. Oh yeah, and of course, Caitlyn Jenner supported Trump. Like, what are you doing?
I wondered that myself. Just because someone is one thing doesn't necessarily mean they're another. Look at Suella Braverman or Rishi Sunak, South Asian,
Or Preeti Patel.
or Clarence Thomas. He's black, but he's a Republican and one of your Supreme Court justices. So yeah, 2 plus 2 does not always equal 4, and even I'm sometimes guilty of it too because they sometimes look at me and they think, "Oh, I bet he can't eat pork because he looks Muslim," or "I bet he, listens to hip hop or uh, talks a certain way." I talk like this or that because they say, "Oh, he's probably black or something." But no,
Stereotyping you, basically, yeah.
no, I'm probably the whitest mixed race person on the planet.
Well,
Um,
can,
eh, I'm not
I
comfortable
suppose
with,
you can
and
come across as quite white sometimes. Yeah, not gonna lie.
I'm the most British American person you'll ever meet. Sometimes the most American British person you'll ever meet. So I know what it's like to be sort of defying labels, but some people they take it too far. My goodness.
Yeah, yeah, that's true thing. I remember
But
one episode of on a well, not a, that's not linked to what exactly we're just saying, but I mean it is linked to the whole LGBTQ. I remember that sitcom on BBC called Men Behaving Badly. I trust you. Did you ever watch it?
yeah, I had Martin Clunes, who I
Yeah,
call Big Ears. He's on Doc Martin.
Martin Clunes and Neil Morrissey and Carolyn Quentin and Leslie Ash. But yeah, we probably don't know. So anyway, there's one. But by the way, it has not aged well. It is remarkably problematic in so many areas. But there's one episode where Neil Morris's character Tony thinks the girl who lives above him, Deborah, played by Leslie Ash, is going through a lesbian phase, and of course he's so desperate to sort of like listen in on it. But I mean, you just hear the two guys talking about it, and it's just about lesbianism, and it's just wow. It's like, say, what do lesbians do? Yeah, because it's like bring up a whole train set, and we find out there's no plug. It's like, what? Who the fuck thinks just? It's just like, wow, we've come a long way. I think most people know how lesbians would actually get it on with each other, and then of course, I mean, they then refer to gay men as just homosexuality. It's like, I'm just thinking, no, it's both homosexuality. Way to be a little bit, well, don't know what,
I mean,
sexist.
no. The reason why I'm whimpering is because I'm a little bit guilty of liking a lot of these sort of shows from a bygone era. In our formative years, we would watch stuff that, looking at it now, probably would have to be censored or toyed around with just to make it more socially acceptable to Gen Z or even some millennials as well. But yes, there are millennials who, yes, have grown up on stuff that probably would not be able to pass on the air by today's standards. I know Little Britain and Come Fly With Me comes to mind, which I actually thought was all right. I like some of Little Britain. I think Come Fly With Me is even better, but I know outside of the blackface and racial stereotyping, there was accused of trying to promote sort of homophobic stereotyping of, "You're the gay in the village, I'm David, oh, behave."
It's worth pointing out Matt Lucas himself is actually gay, so I mean, I think he can get away with a joke like that, or at least more than anyone would be able to, because yeah, like I said, he's actually gay.
That is true. I mean, but at the same time, some people, maybe of a particular culture, they also can be accused of perpetuating certain stereotypes of that group that it makes people on the right wing sort of exploit it for their own advantage. It's a weird way of viewing things. I'll tell you that. I know there was a black comedy troupe, at least during the era of Jim Crow segregation, that put in the blackface themselves, even though they were black, to try to play at the white audience for laughing at. I'm sorry to use this kind of language for making Negroes look like a bunch of coons. Yes, so it's a sort of power play trip that they're trying to do for satire to sort of twist it on its head. It's what essentially sort of like feminist comedy or sort of rape revenge thrillers kind of do that as well. Some of them, maybe used to titillate, but also used as a vehicle to warn people about the dangers of men themselves. But yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a fair point. Also, I brought up that back in an earlier subject, I brought up that being gay, homosexuality has been legal in France in 1791. Belgium wasn't far behind at 1795. And in fact, I looked around. If you actually look into it, you actually realize how freaking bad we were at getting that. Because sure, France and Belgium were incredibly early, but then even Italy, it's like the 1880s, and same with freaking Turkey when it was the Ottoman Empire. That legalized homosexuality in the 1888 or something like that. I mean, most European countries legalized. Well, they probably didn't get. Some of them got it in the 1800s, or if they got it in the 1900s, it was much earlier. And, I mean, it is a bad reflection on us. And Ireland didn't even legalize it until 1993. So, fuck me, that is just bad.
Sometimes I do forget that us British people, or Anglos in general, are some of the most conservative people in Europe. It may not seem that way when you look at how, let's say, Eastern Europeans view Arab migrants or the Italians, the Catholic Church, how they view about homosexuals or abortions and contraception, that sort of thing. But yeah, in all fairness, we are not the most enlightened country in the continent. I was in France for some time, obviously for the Cannes Film Festival, and the outside of films being passed as tout public or 12, despite them probably being 18 or 15 in our country, they actually still have porno shops and cinemas in that area where you could go downstairs and watch some hardcore stuff. Some of it probably would be illegal by UK standards.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
I'm not saying anything out there, but yes, they even had at one shop that's a little bit like CEX in the UK. There's a few hentai titles on the top shelf in the shop, and these were versions of that anime that were illegal under UK law, and they had it, and I was like, should I get it? Or am I going to face deportation or be questioned by immigration customs enforcement for bringing obscene materials? British people, Anglos in general, are very uptight. I think it's part of it because of our Protestant heritage. But at the same time, I think Catholics are probably much more uptight about things, but they seem to be quite loose about the rules.
Well, again, I just mentioned Ireland, so yeah.
Well,
I mean, well, I mean, I would say about you say about Protestants and Catholics, but you could just say Christianity in general. I mean, I don't really think you can really talk much about LGBT rights without just bringing up Christianity, because I mentioned earlier, just before the rise of Christianity and spread of Christianity throughout Europe, I mean, most of the cultures there were pretty much okay with homosexuality, or just plain didn't care. I mean, I know this could just be the atheist in me talking, but I mean, I can't help but blame the Abrahamic religions, as mostly Christianity and Islam, for homophobia in general.
no, they actually were by design, and because the colonial regime, they brought a lot of their old ideas and common laws and civil laws to the colonies as a way to try to convert the savages or these uncivilized people to their own sort of ways. I think it's awfully condescending, is what it is. The reason why I was blasting at Catholics is because from that earlier segment where you heard me do the whole, it's been 2 weeks since my last confession, is because there was always a stereotype, at least when I was growing up, that Catholic people were always much more conservative than Protestants. I think partly of it may have to do with my knowledge of at least Italy or Ireland, the Republic particularly, and Northern Ireland, which is split. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But I know Catholics sometimes can be a bit loose with the rules because a lot of Catholic people will sleep uh, with significant others at a young age and then try to confess at church and do the whole Father, Son, Holy Spirit thing. And they say, oh, don't get an abortion, but they beat their wives or they're having pasta. So a lot of it's maybe sort of ethnic stereotyping, but yeah, just take my word for it. But at the same time, Italy was also responsible for making a lot of sort of raunchy and saucy movies that I'm sure the Vatican did not approve of, like Caligula and Sarlo, King Dick, which was an
Well,
animation.
we are quite lucky. I mean, one thing that's happened, especially over past, well, within living memory, is Europe as a whole has become one of the most secular societies on the planet. I mean, obviously France has been aggressively secular for God knows how long now. But I mean, in Britain, I mean, you have a church of it. How many people actually go to church on a regular basis, or even go to church at all and everything? I mean, very, very few. I mean, and the Germans. I mean, you go to Scandinavia. I mean, they're like in Sweden, 85% of the population is an atheist or something like that. Or that might be an exaggeration, but most people in the Scandinavian countries aren't religious. Most people in Britain, France aren't religious. For low countries, is Belgium, Netherlands. I don't think they are in Germany either. I hear like in Spain and Italy they are slightly more, but their actions would not indicate that. I mean, even the Irish, who probably have a reputation for being the most religious bunch in Europe, probably are going to move around that. I mean, it's quite telling that politicians in most European countries tend to, if anything, downplay their religious affiliations, whereas in America they always like to try to big them up. They always have to say, "Oh, I'm a man of God and I believe in it." Although that has seems to have gone down by the wayside recently. I mean, I don't think Biden ever talks about it. Anyway, this might be a bit off topic, but I
No,
mean,
well, it's not, because religion and control of people is pretty much censorship in a nutshell. Before the government came along, you had ideologies or spiritual philosophies that determined and dictated what people can or cannot do. And religion has always been a hindrance as far as censorship is concerned of art or film or television music. So you're certainly onto something there, but at least from my experience,
well, again, Mary Whitehouse.
oh, no mistake in there. But in my experience, there are still some Europeans who cling on to old ways. And you don't have to look too far than to go to Eastern Europe, where Hungary and Poland, if you're not a Catholic, fuck off. And if you, Italy still has that strong vestige of
Oh yeah, Poland as
cultural
well.
influence as well. Well, Poland is, I think it's like 90%. Although it's a bit weird because Poland has released some films for the Polish-speaking market in the UK that are very graphic, like the movies of Patryk Vega and some of the 18 certificate films that have titles I can't even pronounce because I don't. Polish is a very difficult language, and some of those movies have got graphic sex scenes or violence or profanity that would certainly make any sort of Italian woman whose name is Giuseppe or Ophelia blush. Oh, Dio mio. Sorry about my opinions on Italians. I think part of it's what I've been watching in movies and TV, because you know how they are. They're always like, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. They pray to the Pope and everything. I know Ireland, like you said earlier on, has become much more liberal than when I was growing up. There would have never been a time where abortion, homosexuality, or a gay, half Indian, half Irish, Tashech, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, or TD, would ever become part of law.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, because they had they even put it down to a referendum in Ireland. I can't remember how long it maybe it's about 10 years ago. I can't quite remember. About I'll just Wikipedia it right now actually.
But in many aspects, Ireland is making us English people look like we're a bunch of Puritans or behind the times. I don't know how it is, but I think the Tory party might have some part to play in it, because you don't see this in Republic of Ireland, but you see a lot of this sort of right-wing hoopla in Northern Ireland and England, to some extent Wales, but Scotland and the Republic of Ireland is not having a lot of the problems that we in England are having. Go figure.
Yeah, it's 2015 they actually did. Yeah, at a referendum during earlier during that year as to whether or not they should allow gay marriage should be allowed. And yeah, 62% of them did say yes, it should be legalized. Now, while I don't think something like that should be put down to a public vote, because it's civil rights and you can't vote on civil rights, that's why they're called rights. It is still quite refreshing to know that this society that had a reputation of being aggressively Catholic at one point did actually turn around and simply say, no, we do support these rights. I mean, yeah, I'd said it to my mum once. She said, "Yeah, but they're only human and everything. They have a moral compass at the end of the day." And I guess morality does trump religion. Well, we hope it does anyway, and I think it does.
Well, you have to look a little deeper in some aspects, because some cultures are not ready for it. If you try fighting for the same sort of things in many Islamic countries, it'll fail.
It's been legal in Jordan since 1950. Well, not marriage, but homosexuality has been legal in Jordan since 1951, which is much earlier than we did it in Britain.
Oh, blimey. I know.
And Bahrain in the early 1970s. So I mean, they're not all just complete the homophobes, but yeah, I mean the Muslim world does have a reputation for being, on the whole, being quite not very gay friendly.
Well, I've heard on the rumor on one of the sides, and I've even heard this from a few people on the left who accuse homosexuality of being a bourgeois disease that's only played by sort of rich or middle class white European elites at
I
the
would re-
expense of the
I would
poor.
refer to that person as a class reductionist at the very
But
best.
you know, I even thought this way too, and I'm left wing, but I always assume that you know, Pratt's hanging on about with the boys and the girls, if you were a boy or a girl, was always something that rich people did. Because working class people or poor people that at least I've known from experience, generally are the most racist, homophobic, or sexist, but not based on their entirely their fault, but mainly based on education and access.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, they're not generally. It's not because like they're just pieces of shit or anything. It's because they've not had access to good education, and yeah, a lot of these people who tend to uh, have bigoted views tend to have it way just because they are poorly educated. It's always more disturbing when you hear these bigoted views come from someone who actually is quite well educated. It was like members of the alt right were. So you realize, oh, you guys aren't just dumb. You're just fucking evil, and yeah, you need to be punched.
It's a weird contradiction, a whole lot of powers at play here between class, gender, race, religion. And that's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts so many times is to understand where people are coming from with some of these ideas. Polls alone can only tell you one thing, but if you look at the history and sort of social fabric of everything, you'll certainly learn a lot more. I know in my area where my grandparents live, I saw for the first time ever an LGBT flag, and this is a Tory area, and it is Kent, which is one of the most conservative right-wing counties, the home of Nigel Farage and anti-immigrant sentiment because of the Dover boats. And I was surprised to see that sort of thing, but it actually made me like, okay, now they're growing up. I even saw Brokeback Mountain DVD at a charity shop. I didn't get it because I've already seen it, but it did make me think. Well, how far you come. I expect at any given moment I'll see the human centipede at a charity shop, which, okay. I saw Hostel, first one. That was, thought, are you sure you want to have that in front of the kids? Because charity shops are known usually to tie with child abuse charities or the Christian church. And certainly a lot of Christian people will not like Brokeback Mountain or Hostel.
Well, yeah, that is although I think comparing Brokeback Mountain to Hostel is a bit well, I mean, it's a bit
Well, I'm sorry.
insensitive in a way because one's like a story about love, the other one's like a torture porn flick. And while both everyone should be allowed to watch both without any hindrance, I just think that the overall themes and tones of the two films could not be more diametrically opposed.
No, but you're right. I mean, they're completely diametrically opposed. It's just I have assumptions about old people and right wingers that other people don't necessarily have. So I assume if you're from Kent and you're old, you're probably watching Only Fools and Horses and old James Bond movies and keeping up appearances. You're not
But
watching Batman
yeah,
Hostel unless you, like Tom, live in Canterbury or a university student or have an arts experience and have tattoos and wear a shirt that says coexist or Che Guevara.
well, by old people we can put. Well, talking about old people, it always makes me think of the phrase "okay, boomer." So I mean, make of that what you will. Just remembered one thing, and we probably might, uh, as a finality and everything, because, uh, well, because we are going an hour and a half into this talk, and we might need to wrap it up sooner or later.
Oh yeah, well,
Do you remember? There's that really old film from 1953 called Glen or Glenda. Do you remember the name? Recognize the name?
not really. Is it related to the Wizard of Oz, like Glenda the Wicked Witch?
No, it's not. It's I can't just looking it up right now. I can't remember who. Oh, it was directed by Ed Wood. You know who did Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh yeah,
So
Tim Burton did a biopic on him.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
that was about a transgender man. Of course, that's all the way back in the 1950s. I mean, you can really so that would have been well ahead of its time. Needless to say, it was a remarkably controversial. And I'm just looking up its alternative versions right now on IMDb. I think it was actually initially rejected by the BBFC. It probably isn't in now, but for God's sake, my typing is really bad. BBFC.
I've got all the time in the world.
Yeah, I'm just. No, I mean, it just suddenly came to my mind that there's this. That of course there was like a film about a trans a trans woman or a trans. I think it was a born a man, but or at least I assigned a male at birth, but yeah, identified it as a woman. So yeah, trans woman then. And of course, that was back when just society would not be able to handle such a thing. And so it's just I don't know. It is completely out. Yeah, it's only been out since in a country on video since 1995. It's still rated 15, mind. But yeah, you don't really think about it as a film about transgenderism being out since being way back in the 1950s. Or it is worth knowing that the Germans in the 1920s actually knew quite a bit about transgenderism because there was that researcher called Magnus Hirschfeld who did a lot of research into sexual identity and gender identity and everything. And as surprise, surprise, he was like the first target of the Nazis, and pretty much all his research was burnt and just lost for the ages. Did you hear about that?
I actually haven't there. I'm actually quite surprised that such a thing would be the case there, but I don't know. In my own weird head, I may have assumed Germany have had some experience in that respect because I know Cabaret, very popular musical. My mother loves it. That there's always the element of sort of camp or sort of LGBT in that musical, or at least the film version was. So that probably explains a few things, at least from back then, where you had to use entertainment as a means to sort of express yourself a little bit that otherwise would not be acceptable in any sort of other climate. It's why people are fine with Robin Williams dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire, but not fine when Robin Williams is being flirtatious with another man in the birdcage.
Well, blimey.
And then on a lower level, I know we should be finishing up soon, but even you and PG films can also get a bit of flack as far as the content is concerned. I know Strange World was a movie that was done by Disney last year that was box office bomb. People blamed it on being too woke or promoting an LGBT agenda, but there wasn't really any scenes of them kissing or anything like that.
there
But
was one in Lightyear, but again, that was done so quickly as to cut it out for Russia and China.
exactly, and that film still failed at the box office. I think a large part of it may be because of parental backlash.
Didn't help, but it was probably during the pandemic, which might have killed it off.
Oh, there's no mistake in that as well. I would believe that was the case. I didn't see it because it's a destruction of nostalgia. Everything that was good to me, Toy Story, one of my all-time favorite film, they molded it by trying to make it too modern and trying to cash in on a franchise that probably didn't need to be franchised too much. So that's why it has nothing to do with the LGBT content. I know a lot of people protested, but that wasn't really that big of a deal to me. In the same
It
way
just
that the
yeah,
Little Mermaid race change was not the problem. It was the fact that they remade it was the big problem for me.
oh yeah, totally. I mean, I get everything. I really don't think the fact that Halle Bailey was the choice was a problem. I mean, it wouldn't matter who played it. I mean, a lot of these Disney live action remakes are crap. Apart from the Jungle Book, that was actually quite cool. Um, well, I guess we've covered everything we can cover. I mean, I mean, shall we?
We'll
Should we
nip
call
it.
it? Should we? Yeah, wrap it up now, Marcus.
Absolutely there, and I know some of our comments may have appeared offensive to you, so I apologize, but this is probably one of the few areas of free speech that we at least do respect, unlike Elon Musk or any of these sort of Steve Bannon, Ben
I respect all
types.
areas of free speech. Actually, I mean,
Well, some people want to kill you so they can have their speech, but you can't have yours. So it's a two-way street. But that's a little off topic. I think we've said our piece. Thank you and good night.
good night.